Hey Christian, how are you today?
Hey Vinny, I'm good. You?
I'm great. I'm really excited about our webinar today and about the topics we're going to be discussing. But first, I'd like to thank the audience for dialing in. As the year is coming to a close and we look to the year ahead, I am grateful for this opportunity and appreciate the time everyone is taking to be with us today. So, as we put 2022 in the rear view, there are a few things we continue to stress as important factors for our clients to consider in 2023. When I considered titles for our agenda today, I thought, wouldn't it be catchy to use newspaper-like headlines, such as Getting Your Data Right, the Downstream Implications, Technology with a Productivity Mindset, Assess, Collaborate, Enable, and ESG Regulations, Reporting, and Disclosures. Be prepared. But before we dive in, Christian, how about we do introductions?
That's a great idea. How about I kick us off then? I've spent most of my career in risk with various capacities. Most notably, I've worked in credit risk for a large institutional bank. I've done a lot of work with op risk, conduct risk, reg implementations, compliance assessment, all in the capacity of working in a Big Four consulting firm. Most recently, as you know, I've been working with you, Vinny, as our lead for the risk and compliance practice to help develop all of the materials and push our risk practice to the new front.
Thank you so much, Christian. I always learn something new about you when you do your intro. Hello, everyone. My name is Vincent Tarantino, Senior Principal and Risk Regulatory and Compliance Leader here at Point B. Quick background about me before we dive in. Before Point B, and before starting my 25-year career in financial services, I was active duty Air Force for 10 years as an intelligence officer. One would argue that's where I built the foundation for my risk, regulatory, and compliance career. After my transition, I started a new career at the Philadelphia Stock Exchange, where one could say is where I cut my risk, regulatory, compliance teeth. As an investigator, equity and options trader, and eventually the director of surveillance, it was there that I learned the intricacies of capital markets and was a part of transforming a function through tech enablement and innovation. I moved to Boston and became the chief regulatory officer of the options and stock exchanges there, where my responsibilities grew beyond market surveillance into transforming an entire organization. I was instrumental in the enhancement of the options trading platform and the design and implementation of the associated surveillance platform. I built out a tech partnership, an exam department, and an oversight program, and liaised with other regulators like myself and those at the federal level. I parlayed my risk, regulatory, and compliance, business, and operational experiences into a consulting role, where I worked alongside risk, regulatory, compliance, legal, IT, ops, and other professionals across a multitude of global financial institutions, regulatory authorities, and even energy businesses. During my first tour as a consultant, in addition to learning a vast amount about capital markets and the financial services industry, I had the privilege of brainstorming solutions, leading teams, and building relationships. It was the success during one of the largest risk regulatory compliance engagements that I was approached to lead a compliance practice at a global financial institution. There, I was provided the opportunity to build programs, leverage technology, write policy, lead teams, and transform business across employee and client onboarding, information barriers surveillance, control room operations, electronic surveillance, and employee trading. I decided I wanted to take all that I had learned and build a business around risk, regulatory, compliance transformation. So off to do another tour of consulting, during which I continued assisting clients across financial services, energy, and regulatory agencies. After many years of success, but a family emergency, I left consulting to be a COO at another global financial institution, but within the wealth management space. It was there that I was instrumental mining and mapping data necessary for the operations of our business, implementing technology to enhance our client onboarding experience, and assisting in the transformation of our global financial crimes operations across AML, KYC, sanction screening, etc. But apparently, I didn't get enough of consulting, and when Point B called, I grabbed the opportunity to come work here as the risk regulatory and compliance lead. It's been a fun and rewarding almost 3-year journey working alongside amazing professionals like you, Christian, and has brought me here today.
Always great to hear your intro, Vinny. So let's jump into our first topic, data. You and I have discussed the importance of data on various occasions, and I've heard you mention the terms common denominator, accuracy, completeness. Could you explain a bit more about what you mean about those terms?
Oh, that's a great starting point, Christian. Yeah, you bet. So, when I refer to data as the common denominator, I mean it cuts across all aspects of business. It literally exists as the common denominator, as we all rely on data for just about everything we do. In regard to the other terms you mentioned, think about the various sentiments we hear from our risk, reg, and compliance clients when we brainstorm solutions with them. We hear them say things like, garbage in, garbage out. I can't get access to my data. My data isn't complete and inaccurate. I don't know what I don't know. We cannot map data to the source, and so on and so on. These sentiments are driven from inaccuracies and incompleteness of data upstream, creating issues and increased workload for risk, reg, and compliance practitioners as the data moves downstream. How can they rely on the output of their surveillance, monitoring, and reporting tools and technology if they aren't sure they have all the data being generated from the source, and if that data is being passed through accurately and completely? I assure you, this isn't the first or last time our attendees have heard this, but I urge them, find themselves in this predicament, lean into 2023 with the mindset and goal to work collaboratively with their business and tech partners to assess and rectify these issues. Working alongside our clients, we have helped them address these issues by conducting data mapping exercises, testing for accuracy and completeness, and establishing workflow processes to highlight and address data handoffs, ownership, accessibility, and accountability. We all need and should be able to rely on complete and accurate data.
Wow, Vinny. These are really great points. You've provided our audience with a lot to ponder. What do you think can be done to help mitigate the downstream impacts caused by incomplete and inaccurate data?
That's a great question, Christian. In a nutshell, data governance, oversight, and security. So, through deliberate coordination and collaboration across these functions, matters related to data can be proactively controlled and actioned when issues arise. So, if not in place, designing and implementing a data governance program is essential in the advancement of control and the proactive mitigation of risk when established with a corrective action platform in place to address ad hoc issues. What I mean is, with the appropriate level of authority, an effective data governance program will enforce change management through the institution of actionable policy and procedures, control the approval process of data feeds and data and tech vendor onboarding through the establishment of protocols, and step in to make rulings, establish priorities, and assign budget related to data matters. However, this is no simple task to accomplish, given the complexity of the topic of data for which a governance program is required. So, when doing so, have you contemplated the role and responsibilities of a chief data governance officer? Does the program include representation from all business lines? Is there a forum established for your risk and issue resolution management? Are your institution's employees aware of the existence of the program, and have they been required to take data management training? There is a myriad of questions to be answered when establishing or refreshing a data governance program. However, keep in mind, you cannot have an effective governance program without the requisite oversight in place. People ask, well, aren't those the same, Vinny? They are not. They are quite different concepts, but when working in conjunction can be very powerful for risk mitigation and identification of data deficiencies and even fraud and bad actor violations. Think of governance as the people and process of the equation, and oversight as the technology, i.e. your controls, your surveillance, your monitoring. You know, Christian, I know we're going to dive deeper into technology next, but it's very important as it relates to data to have a robust oversight program. Those in oversight roles have probably been overwhelmed by the number of fintech and regtech players in this space. But think about it. Gone are the days of throwing personnel at problems. The future is leveraging technology to disrupt the norm. So, looking ahead, this is a strong productivity, efficiency, and cost savings play. So finally, and I know we can go down the rabbit hole regarding security, but I did want to touch upon it very briefly. When we speak to our clients, we highlight the need for accountability, controlled handoffs, onboarding and offboarding, access rights, and permissioning. These elements are critical in the assurance that your data will be passed accurately and completely, and the appropriate staff has access at the appropriate time in their tenure within your institution.
Thanks for sharing your insight on how institutions should organize themselves to manage and govern data. Is there anything else they should be thinking about, creating, and implementing as we look ahead for 2023?
Yes, absolutely. Excellent prompt, Christian. Thank you. Risk regulatory compliance professionals, if they haven't already, they should investigate the creation of an additional line of defense or program, often called testing or controls testing. A program of this nature establishes an extra layer of checks and balances, ones whose findings and results do not come with a negative connotation, but inform the business of the validity of current process, controls, logic, etc. Think about it in this context. While the goal of internal audit as a third line of defense is still a precursor to a regulatory investigation, examination, or audit, it still has a negative connotation and comes with mandated process, procedure, policy, and other requirements, and it gets reported through board channels. Embedding another line of defense, i.e. controls testing, allows the other lines of defense, the existing first and second, to put their controls and logic through the scrutiny of a friendly screening process. Keeping our earlier sentiment in mind, programs of this nature should be developed with a governance and oversight mindset, though. Organizationally structured with governance principles and technology enabled with systems and logic to execute oversight. Organizationally, this program should be led by a risk reg compliance professional with a blend of testing, business, compliance, regulatory, and audit background, or who lived in the line of defense. This individual would be a peer of the other line of defense leaders. It should be structured to align with the organizational functionality of the institution. The makeup of the staff should include those with similar backgrounds as their leader, but with additional technical credentials. The core function of this program will be to design, execute, report, and rationalize results of test scripts that correspond to controls created in the business. An added but imperative function is the creation of a gap assessment, whereby the program identifies missing controls by running diagnostic between rules, regulations, and policies and the current control inventory on a regular and recurring basis. In addition, a critical byproduct of this program will be the identification of data inefficiencies or lack thereof. Test results have a funny way of highlighting missing or broken data. So, we urge our clients who do have this program in place to lean into next year with a refresh or an assessment of sorts while thinking through certain questions, such as how robust is your documentation? What routines do you have in place to ensure there are no gaps between your tests, controls, and policies, rules, and regulations? What is the framework by which they are governed? There are so many other questions here, Christian, all of which I know we would love to help our clients answer.
Vinny, we can all hear the severity in your voice regarding the importance of data. Can you give them another example of the importance of its accuracy and possibly another use case for our audience to consider for 2023?
You know what, Christian? I'm going to answer your question with a question. What is the one thing that institutions cannot avoid year after year and haunts them around every corner? The answer? The regulator. The regulator, yep. Whether it's an exam, an investigation, or a random request, there is one common denominator: data. Keep coming back to that. Every inquiry has a data element and associated request. I challenge our audience. Think about the program you have in place or institute one that's role is regulatory relationship management. What is that, you ask? In simplistic terms, it's a department, program, or function that is responsible for the management, scheduling, and delivery of information related to the request or investigation of all regulatory bodies. A regulatory liaison's role and associated responsibilities will be to serve as the conduit between the regulator and the institution. Nothing sets off a request on a bad foot more than the lack of untimely nature of communication with a regulator. Not only should the communication aspect be timely, but so should the retrieval and delivery of the requested materials. While taking a deep dive into or establishing this program, take a very close look at your institution's response timing. Are there protocols in place that govern the manner, method, and timing related to information and data gathering and delivery? Oh, and while you're at it, how are your regulatory reporting requirements looking in 2023? Are they all buttoned up? Are they auto-generated? Are they delivered with the requisite data? Is there a governance program in place to manage this process? Do you have a fail-safe when your systems go down? Again, what do all these insights have in common? Data. You will uncover very quickly that something is incomplete and or inaccurate and difficult to recreate or mine when a regulator asks.
Hey, Vinny, all of these insights should be top of mind for our clients. If you could leave our audience with one piece of advice that is a common theme throughout the information you have shared, what would it be?
You know what, Christian? The one thing we advise our clients is the importance of documentation. Nothing will get you into hot water quicker than a lack of it. If you do nothing else this coming year, which I most assuredly know you all will, do an inventory and gap assessment of your documentation. I know, which documentation? There is so much. Let's start at the top and work our way down. When were your policies updated? I'm talking about your data governance, code of conduct, ethics, employee trading, personal dealings, onboarding, just to name a few. Do those policies reflect the current state? How about a refresh towards the future state? Do they contemplate growth? Do they have a data component that requires reevaluation? Okay, let's dive a little bit deeper. Are your functional, business, and tech documents up to date and current? And this stretches across all lines of business and functions. These documents are oftentimes the first to be examined during a regulatory inquiry. You have created a multitude of logic-driven scenarios, exception, alert reports, to identify potential fraud, trading violations, bad actors, etc. But when was the document most recently updated, and does it reflect the current output? Do an assessment of these requirements. Test the accuracy and completeness of the data required to generate those alerts. If you made a decision based on thresholds, scenarios, or other criteria, have you documented the rationale for those decisions? How about your SLAs with your internal and external vendors? How about your vendor risk management for that matter? I know we will discuss the increased risk related to vendor and tech management, but we stress with our clients it is important to highlight the need to assess documentation in place for these relationships. Okay, last, certainly not least, do you have processes and procedures in place to update your documentation consistently and regularly? Having a routine and schedule in place that governs the repeatable review of your documentation prevents you from stale and outdated information and is tremendously helpful for documenting the why in addition to the how you've decided to monitor and surveil. I know this is a lot all at once, but reviewing and assessing the validity of your documentation will not only highlight the necessity and rationale of your language, logic, and criteria, tangentially, but equally important, it will call attention to data breaks and inconsistencies. Christian, there are so many other topics related to data that we can discuss, like reg reporting, record retention, disaster recovery, data security, moving to the cloud, so on and so on. But I guess maybe for another webinar.
I completely agreed. How about we switch topics then, touch upon a few other key predictions for the upcoming year. Earlier we talked about technology. With all the innovations in RegTech and the economic landscape for 2023, we expect to continue to see transformation in risk, regulatory, and compliance.
Yes. I like where you're heading with this. Okay, how about this? Let's frame this topic in a lifecycle process and then dig into it piece by piece. How about we think about it from an assess, collaborate, and enable lens?
Love it. Let me kick this one off then. Over the past few years, our industry has seen an influx of vendor technologies overlaying enterprise architecture without really replacing the aging tech. This has resulted in an increase in operational risk across the vendor stack.
Absolutely, totally agree. Organizations should begin to look to reduce that risk by assessing the validity, the need, and the longevity of the tech and the vendor stack.
It seems very timely, with what we're hearing from our customers moving away from mainframe and towards the cloud. This industry-wide transformation is a perfect catalyst for the rationalization exercise to assess which technologies have become redundant or even obsolete. Based on what you're saying, in 2023, we expect to see a trend of tech stack reassessment while continuing to drive innovation across the risk practices. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. Exactly. However, keep in mind that innovation also has embedded risk. We advise our clients to introduce the risk, regulatory, and compliance personnel at the start of the business requirements development process. This reduces risk. So think about it. Stakeholder management is key. Keep in mind that we are seeing frequent disconnects across business, IT, and the risk, reg, and compliance departments due to fundamental drivers of change, specifically the business being responsible for bringing innovation for enhancements to the user, risk reg and compliance being responsible for building a better mousetrap, and IT acting as a connective tissue and looking for operational efficiencies through technology.
So, what you're saying is that there needs to be enhanced collaboration across the organization's stakeholders, really to manage the risk in innovation and align to continued regulatory pressures. The partnership between risk compliance and the business are even more pressing as we enter this upcoming year.
You are spot on, Christian. That brings me to my third point regarding enablement. As companies are looking to do more with less, risk operations continue to be optimized to support all aspects of the business, spanning, for example, onboarding, case management, control mapping, and exception processing, just to name a few. Fintechs, providing specialized, optimized solutions to disrupt the status quo. Some notable examples that come to mind are around control analysis and developing, moving away from labor-intensive processes in favor of NLP or AI solutions. And as cost savings remain at the forefront of the organization's priority list, as we enter the new year, our clients will look to mitigate staffing surges as regulatory inquiries continue, favoring implementation through technology instead.
I really love hearing that. This perfectly aligns with the various financial services partnerships that we are exploring, and the positive impacts these technologies would have really if the risk teams implement this. A great example of this is leveraging the workflow tools such as Celonis or CloudCase to design and implement functionality that previously took firms months in substantially less time and with far greater efficiency. We look to create operational efficiencies in enterprise platforms like Salesforce through the use of tech-enabled solutions while continuing to mitigate various risks.
It's great, Christian, when tech enablement disrupts the status quo in a positive and productive way, isn't it?
Yep.
You know what? In addition to the insights we've provided thus far, what do you think? Does it make sense to touch upon ESG?
I think that's a great idea. There are so many discussions we are having with clients related to the space. Where do you think we should focus our time?
You know what? I agree. We are talking a lot to our clients. Our ESG folks here at Point B have done a really great job leaning into this initiative. How about we focus on some of the specifics of the SEC regulation, how our attendees should be getting their house in order, given the related regulatory scrutiny, and provide them with questions they should be answering internally.
I think that's a great idea, Vinny. Let's dive in. So, I know that on March 21st, 2022, the SEC published its highly anticipated rule for mandatory climate risk disclosure. I understand from my research that this rule will apply to all public companies in the U.S. Would you provide a few high-level points for our audience so they should really keep top of mind?
You got it. And you're correct, Christian. The disclosure compliance date will be staggered depending on company size, starting in fiscal year 23 for large organizations. Top three things I'd like to highlight regarding the rule. First, companies must disclose how climate-related risks impact their business, strategy, and future outlook, what governance and risk management processes are in place, and any information about climate-related targets and goals. Second, the SEC has called for climate-related disclosure in registration statements and Exchange Act annual reports, including the 10K. Third, the SEC is looking for robust quantitative financial estimates. And as of earlier this quarter, only 1 in 5 companies reporting to TCFD disclose impact on financial performance.
Thanks for that insight, Vinny. I know with the mandatory climate risk disclosure beginning in 23 for the larger companies and 24 for the smaller ones, it's critical for businesses to spend the next year to 2 years to really get their houses in order for ESG. Where do you suggest they focus?
That is a great question. There's a lot of scrutiny at play here, but I'd like to call attention to 3 specific focal points related to the rule. First, integration regarding reporting. With so many frameworks out there, it is easy to see why companies are facing significant data and consistency challenges in their ESG reporting. Not to mention finding dedicated resources to navigate the influx of requests. However, as demand for transparency and higher quality ESG disclosure increases, companies need a robust strategy for integrating sustainability into their DNA. Some frameworks are better equipped to do this than others, TCFD being of paramount importance. Second, create a Scope 3 emission strategy. Having a Scope 3 strategy is not only critical for SEC disclosure, but also in mitigating future climate risks. Companies will be required to report on GHG emissions across all scopes. Scope 3, however, represents the largest contributor to GHG, often over 80% of a company's emissions. Third, one of the most controversial provisions in the SEC's proposed rule involves the requirement for companies to disclose any analysis they use to measure the resilience of their business strategies. There are so many components to disclose. I'll just rattle off a few. 1, governance of climate-related risks and relevant risk management processes. 2, how any climate-related risks identified by the registrant have had or are likely to have a material impact on its business and consolidated financial statements. And 3, how any identified climate-related risks have affected or are likely to affect the registrant's strategy, business model, and outlook. So, Kristen, we have given the audience so much to ponder. Do you think there's anything additionally, maybe some other topics or questions they should consider?
I think we could talk for days on this topic, Vinny. I do like the idea of leaving the audience with some additional thoughts to ponder, such as, is your ESG reporting audit ready? Are you prepared for the SEC mandatory climate risk disclosure? Are you aligned with the ESG frameworks? What are your climate risk transition plans? Is your ESG reporting investor trusted?
Those are great. Those are great, Christian. I couldn't agree with you more. You know what? We didn't overload our audience today with the multitude of topics, both ESG and other, that we've discussed. I know you and I could continue our dialogue, but I think it's best we wrap up for the time being. What do you think?
Agreed, Vinny. I love chatting with you on all these topics as always. Thanks for providing the audience with so much to think about for 2023.
No, Kristen, thank you. This is a very exciting time to be working with risk, reg, and compliance, especially as there is so much uncertainty across the globe. Our audience should lean into 2023 with an eye towards tech enablement that increases productivity and reduces risk.
I think that's a great underlying thread to all the topics that we addressed today. Starting with the data, where we're stressing the importance for accuracy, completeness, and governance. Then moving on to tech, where we're advising our clients to rationalize their tech stacks. And then finishing off with ESG, where regulatory uncertainty could dictate continuing with spend, but with caution.
Kristen, that is a great summary. I appreciate that. I know our audience appreciates the summary and all the things we went through today. I want to thank the audience again for attending today's webinar. If you have any questions about the things that Christian and I discussed today, we would be happy to do a deep dive. Reach out to us in the new year. I do want to leave you with happy holidays to you and to your families. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.